Mr. Rainwater.
Hey there, Jow.
We're back for probably a much shorter podcast for reasons that are about to become apparent. The things I did learn in art school.
Yeah.
I don't know. We're approaching this with the ending on a good note, but I don't know how good of a note it's gonna be. So I'll kick us off. There is one specific filmmaking thing that did get taught to me in film school that I had no idea existed before I even got there. And that was and I think they probably teach correct me if I'm wrong, they might teach this in sequential as well, the rule of 180.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. I had no idea that existed.
Yeah, because no, go ahead, John. What were you going to say?
Well, I was just going to say, for anybody who's listening that does not know what that is, when you're telling a visual story, you have shots. Do they have a different word for it in sequential? It's panels,
no,
right?
They use, panels, but
they're interchangeable.
It gets referred to as a shot.
So anyway, when you are in a location, I guess in a sequential, it would be the same thing. Say you're in a room. The idea is you draw a line, it's just basically a straight line. And you are allowed to move the camera within 180 degrees of that line,
right,
like behind that line. So you can move it to the left, you can move it to the right, you can move it up, you can move it down. Anywhere behind that line, you're good. If you jump over the line, as they say, you have to really make sure you are establishing that jump in your viewer's mind so that they can still understand where the geography of everything is. So good ways to do that is by going to either like an ultra wide shot on the other side, because then that'll establish, we've jumped the line. Or you can jump the line if you go to like a cutaway, like a random object somewhere that's not within the frame already.
Yeah.
So like if you went, you got two people at a table talking, and then you cut to a fire alarm on the wall. Who knows where that fire alarm actually is? Yeah. You can then jump the line because the audience is like, oh, we're moving, and they won't get confused and frustrated about the visual real estate as to where they are.
Exactly. And I think the reason that the 180 rule gets established is not because it's something that's commonly like mishandled, professionally. It's something that's mishandled you're about to say, I don't know.
Keep going. I'm going to tell you a story a professor told me, but go ahead.
Because I think it's mishandled most immediately, like on the more amateurish or student level, because it's not something that you think about at that level.
Right.
And usually when the 180 rule actually becomes an issue is in action sequences and dialogue sequences and in sequences where it's extremely important that you have you have an establishment of that location, right? And where breaking it creates disorientation. Now, there are places where you would want to break it very specifically to create that disorientation, right? But I think generally that rule is established and especially, for somebody going into film and television, right? You want to have something that isn't going outside the lines of like prescribed direction or cinematography or whatever, right? Yeah. Because if you're shooting a sitcom, you have a pretty much self-established 180 rule because you can't go further into the studio, right?
Right, you are the fourth wall. So
yeah, exactly. So that it is more of a thing for like specific like cinematography and film kind of stuff. But yeah, it applies equally to comics for sure. The thing that's interesting in comics and that I've learned over time is that you kind of get forced into not necessarily breaking the 180 rule, but like finding ways to work around it to create flow on the page. And that's something that's very difficult for me to describe auditorially. I would have to actually draw it out to really perfectly show it. But basically, like, this is a rule that I learned in art school, which is that in order to make it easier for somebody to read a page, you want to go in sort of a Z pattern. So generally the way that works is a person will read a panel left to right, top to bottom. So generally your text is at the top in what's called like the headspace. That's where usually all your balloons go in a comic book, right? Is in that top of the panel, because that's usually the space that's not occupied by the characters, just as a function of the fact that gravity exists. So like, if your characters are standing or sitting, they're going to be towards the bottom of the panel. It's a very just general intuitive thing in the way that people read things. Because of this, you want to ally with that to make the comic easier to read. So you have what is called like a Z panel, where let's say that your page is like cut into it's 9 panels total, right? And you have three tiers of 3 panels.
Mm-hmm.
So you're going to go left to right, but then you're going to do that transition when you get to the third panel. You're going to go over to the fourth panel. So you want to create some element in that third panel that directs the reader's eye in such a way that they're not going to go too far to like panel 6 or panel 5. You really want to create a strong direction that leads the director's eye, or the reader's eye, to panel 4. That sometimes requires sort of either you cut the 180 a little bit, sometimes that is it, there's a lot of different ways of doing it, right? But the most important thing is just like sticking to that idea of like the Z pattern. So that's definitely something that I learned in art school that I think I would have learned it later on, but I don't think I would have had it drilled into me in the same way. I think something that probably you and me both might share in common too, from having learned from art school, and let me know if I'm wrong about this, but I know sometimes I say this pretty frequently to people when I try and justify SCAD, is that it really helped me learn like discipline, like the discipline that I needed to like, create comics for myself.
Yeah. That's kind of in line with one of the things that I was going to say. It was more so about, I don't want to call it growing up, but becoming self-independent and everything like that. Because before then, I don't know if this is a privilege or not. I would call it a privilege, but my parents took care of all the laundry. I'd never done a load of laundry before I went away to college, and that was a learning experience to me. I had to learn how to do laundry. I mean, it's simple as shit, but when you don't know what you're doing, it's intimidating. It's just like anything else. And it became that idea that if I learned very early, and very few people at our college actually tried to learn this on their own. But if you don't get up when your alarm clock goes off, no one's coming in knocking on your door to say, hey, don't you got class? No one else gives a shit. Your roommate doesn't give a shit.
Yeah.
And unless they're trying to get laid, and like there is no second chance. So like a lot of the artists that we went to school with, the students, I should say, they didn't give a shit. They slept through their alarm. Oh, well, I missed class, blah, blah, blah. And that was it. For me, it was, I have to get up on that first alarm. I can't snooze because I will sleep in and I will not do it. I have to start working on this script because no one's gonna come and say, hey, what are you doing? Are you working on anything? Oh, you want to help? Blah, blah, blah. All that kind of shit. Being self-dependent was the real big takeaway from college for me, was learning how to be independent. The sad part is I think I became too independent. Where no, I'm dead serious too. Where
is this referring back to last week's episode when you were talking about sort of how networking is a really crucial part in filmmaking, and that was sort of something that you didn't get so much?
Yeah, and that's the thing is like, well, not only did I become too independent, and I learned this last weekend doing the 48-hour film fest, I am a control freak where I have to be doing in charge and calling shots and stuff because I don't. And after I watched the short film that we made, I realized that I should have been, but that's another story for another episode. I don't know. I guess I started having trust issues with other people that they are will. And, you know, I guess a lot of that is not just because I became so self-dependent, but I watched so many artists, and this is an attribute we've mentioned so many times on this podcast. Good artists, good writers, whatever, are good observers.
Yeah.
And it's been my observation that artists in general, or wannabe artists, I will call them that, are lazy as fuck. Have no inclination to be a self-starter, to wake up on time, to be at a meeting on time, to prepare accordingly, to be knowledgeable in what they're doing. Like, it is across the board ego. And it comes from the idea that a lot of art is subjective, right? Like, you know, who's to say what's good or bad? I would say too many artists lean on that as motivation to just be lazy. And that pisses me off like no other. Like, I love to learn. If someone knows more than me, I'm the first person there annoying the shit out of them, picking their brain. Like, that's what I like to do.
Yeah.
Like, if I'm on set and I notice somebody knows more than me, I'm going to start asking them questions. I'm going to start, you know, seeing like, oh, their process and this and that. If they don't, I'm the guy usually standing there going, we shouldn't put the camera here. This isn't going to edit well. Like, you know what I mean? And that has just kind of fucked me up in terms of being a good network. But on that same note, and I'll let you get back to your point about it, you know, going to art school, going to film school taught me about situations like that, where usually when you show up to a party, you know someone there, right? You know, you sit down, you start making, you know, your usual chat, and it becomes very cliquey. And eventually art school does become that. Don't get me wrong. But it's the first time since like elementary school where if you go to an out-of-state college and you don't go with anybody else that you know, you have to restart your, and I don't want to call it networking, but like friends group. You know what I mean? Like, you go to a class and most of the people in that class don't know each other. 99% of the people do not know each other, and they won't unless one person says to the other person, hey man, I like that shirt. That's really cool. Hey, where did you get the thing? Do you know what the syllabus? Have you already heard anything about this teacher? Oh man, I didn't catch the bus from O House. But like shit like that, you really had to start stepping up. It's the first time since you're a little kid that you're out of that comfort zone. So it did teach me to go into places that I had never been before, knew no one, and try to acclimate and not be an anxious fuck, because that's what it is at first. You are anxious as hell. You don't know who to talk to. You don't know what to say. You don't know if you're in the right place. Like, it's all those things. And you really kind of have to kind of master your situation. And that was one of the things that I learned going away to college. I don't know if necessarily I'd say going to art school, but going away to college is, just kind of being, and this goes back to that whole self-starter thing, but taking initiative and,
For sure.
and, taking a shot, taking a chance.
Oh,
but what were you going to say about it? Go ahead and extrapolate your thoughts.
Well, we were still talking about discipline, right? I think for me, like, the main takeaway for me in the sequential arts department was that I was really constantly drilled on like what the expectations for me would be as like a working artist. And so I was always trying to figure out how to meet those expectations and then get myself used to a rigorous work schedule, because I had no clue what that would be like. Like, previously in school, I was the kind of person who I would do my homework. Like in high school, I would do all my homework like in class, because I knew what was going to be issued as homework. I knew what we were going to learn, so I just was always ahead of that.
That's clever.
I just like, I mean, I was, in a way, it was kind of lazy. It was like laziness in a way, because it was basically a way for me to not have to deal with that shit when I got home. Like, I was just like, I'm going to do my homework now so I don't have to, I can go play video games, you know. I can zone out and not think about any of that stuff.
I don't see that as laziness. I see that as getting shit out of the way. Like, that's checking off the boxes.
Well, where it feels like laziness now is after going into college, and then suddenly in college, like when you have projects and stuff.
Yeah, you ain't doing that shit in class.
Yeah, like it really changed my relationship with how I thought about that time after class. Suddenly I thought about it as, oh, class is actually an obstruction to homework now. And like,
that's interesting.
The thing I need to do actually does not take place during class. It takes place outside of class. And class is where I go just to get the, you know, authentication that I did my work. And that was it was a total flip, right? It was a complete flip of like how I looked at my relationship with school. And that started in college before going to SCAD. But it really cemented once I was in SCAD, where I was really thinking about, I was spending more time thinking about how I was going to be able to fit in all the time to meet the projects, more so than like, you know, attending class and all that stuff. Not that I had, there were definitely classes where I was glad to go to class, especially classes where I was going to be doing like life drawing and stuff. Those are always like really important experiences. And then additional other experiences that were really important to me were, you know, and this didn't happen in every class, but depending on the professor, there would be professors who had really important life experience that I learned a lot from. Like Tom Lyle, who since passed, he had so much to say about working in comics that was both like emotionally fulfilling to me. Like it gave me a sense of like, oh, okay, I can do this. I don't need to like freak out, you know? And also just like, just real. He just had a lot of real talk about like what you should expect if you ever work in comics. And that was definitely stuff I wouldn't get access to until beyond that. I wouldn't get access to until after doing an internship. And it's not the easiest thing to get access to necessarily. Like being able to pick somebody's brain about like, you know, oh, what is this actually like?
So allow me to pick your brain. Is there any particular nugget from him that still sticks with you today? Like, what's the top one?
I mean, there's a couple of different things. Making comics was pretty sweet in the 90s. That was one of them. But also just like, I think the big thing I learned from him was like, don't be surprised to get in squabbles with editorial staff, because they have a totally different mindset on things than you might as the artist. You know, as the artist, you might, you know, be in that ego's place of just like, you know, I'm going to turn this ship around, or I've got my own statements to make. And ultimately you have to negotiate that, you know, with the people you're working with. Even if your name is on the cover of a book, that doesn't mean that you're the one who's making every single decision. There are people in the background who are adding to those decisions and complexifying those decisions for their own particular aesthetic reasons, or for reasons that are outside of any of that may just have to do with business, you know.
Interesting.
And not to take it personally. I think that was a big one. Was like learning not to take it personally when maybe management or editors make decisions that affect like your output, you know. Being in a place of just going like, okay, well, that's how it works, you know, and then just moving on. So I'd say that one is particularly important. Has still followed me for a long time. But yeah,
one that stuck with me, I had a professor named Michael Hofstein. He was a cinematographer, and I lucked out on this. It was the first day of class for cinematography class. I think it was lighting and field. And I came from a martial arts background, right? And martial arts is heavily influenced by the military.
Yeah.
So there's that, and then there's the whole, like honor and ranking and all that kind of stuff. So coming from a martial arts background, I know as a black belt, which I don't know if I think I was a black belt when I went to college. I don't think I was a master belt yet. That as a black belt, you don't sit in a chair because the chairs are for the master belts. Like they're for the higher grade. When I got to the lighting and field class, it wasn't like a normal, typical classroom that people are thinking of. It's a big studio space. It's a brick wall. There's a couple like lighting backgrounds. There's a bunch of light stands sticking around, sandbags, film equipment and shit. There was a whole bunch of metal folding chairs in like one of those racks, those roller racks that they use to kind of store them. And I remember as people came in, they would just come in and take a chair off of it and they would pop it open and sit down. And for some reason, I remembered not doing that because it just wasn't like physically instill in me. I was just like, oh, I'm just going to wait and see because maybe we'll move to another place or blah, blah, blah. Or, I don't know. Hofstein came in screaming. You don't touch those chairs. Those chairs are not for you. If you're on production and you're sitting, you're not doing your job. You're fired. I was one of maybe 3 that didn't get yelled at that day. And I think that might have been one of the reasons why I had problems networking because everybody fucking hated me for that.
Oh, right. Yeah. No,
but
that makes sense.
I'm sure it was the least reason why they hated me, but it was definitely one of them. But he was one that was full of nuggets about production, like kind of like how you said. He said one that sticks with me to this very, very day, and I see it every day on a film set too. And it's the mindset, and it goes back to being self-accountable and the alarms thing. If you're on time, or no, if you're early, you're on time. If you're on time, you're late. If you're late, you're fired. And that was the mindset of being like making your call time. If you're early, you're on time. That's what you're supposed to do. If you're on time, you were running late. Like you're not set up. You're going to be frazzled. You're not in the groove yet. And if you show up late, chances are you've already been fired. Like they'll just tell you, go right back home. We don't need you. Beat it. And that's especially as someone who is currently in the pre-production process for their own feature film.
Yeah.
I know from past experience on shooting digits, when one actor shows up late and there's 5 actors on set and the entire crew, and we can't shoot until that one actor gets there, you are wasting the time of 20 people. That's 20 people who are collecting a paycheck to do fucking nothing because one person is late. So it really kind of instilled in me that whole idea, like, and nowadays I'm always 15 minutes early to anywhere I have to be. And if it's someplace I've never been before, I look at the GPS and it says, oh, leave at this time. I always tack on like 15, 20 minutes ahead of that and think, okay, traffic and, maybe there's some weather that might slow me down or I might get lost and miss a turn or some shit like that. And I am constantly trying to make sure that I am early for absolutely everything. Does it end up wasting more of my time? Yes, because I sit there waiting for 15 minutes most of the time to get somewhere. And, you have a doctor's appointment. It's at 2:00. You show up at 1:45. They don't get you till 2:10. Like that's the nature of the beast. But I am on time because of that, man. And that was one of those things that I really learned that I think has been, reputable to me. One of the things that I hate that I learned about that is now people see me as being responsible and dependable. So more things get shoved onto my shoulders because they know I'll take care of it.
Yeah.
And they can depend on me. And that shouldn't be the way that it is. And that's why he came in barking at the class, because everybody's supposed to pull their weight.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, that's one of those things that really kind of sticks with me. I don't know. What else, Mr. Rainwater? Can you think of anything?
Gosh, I know.
I gotta be honest with you. I'm running out of nuggets now.
I know. Discipline was the big one for me, and then just stuff from. Stuff from Professor Lyle. I learned a lot.
I learned that films moved at 24 frames per second, and the perception, what is it called? The illusion of perception, or I don't know what it's called, because it's a bunch of still images and you perceive them as moving even though they're not moving.
I learned in a comics history class that like apparently the Matrix, like the Wachowskis stole a lot of stuff from other stories to make the Matrix.
Borrowed is the term that we like to use.
Borrowed.
Or
it might as well be borrowed.
Paying homage to. Pardon me. We're paying homage.
Yeah, I don't know.
I'll tap in if you don't have one.
Yeah.
Because you saying that actually triggered something in my brain. Film history class. My teacher taught me something that actually I still believe to this very day, and I actually champion this thought quite often when I'm arguing with idiots online about box office. A film's box office reception is a product not of the product itself, but a product of the time in which it is released. And I remember he was talking about like The Bicycle Thief, the Charlie Chaplin movie or something. But then, you know, being a kiss-ass student, I remembered raising my hand and volunteering this thought, and he confirmed it right there on the spot. He was excited that I mentioned it. The original Spider-Man movie with Tobey Maguire, right? That movie was the first superhero movie, black and white, good guys versus bad guys, to come out after 9/11. So that's why that box office was through the fucking roof, was because the culture at a time was looking for very plain cut, good guy versus bad guy, good guy's gonna win. And that to me is really what, because there had been superhero movies before it. There had been X-Men, there had been Blade. You know what I mean? Like, and none of them had done the box office that Spider-Man did. And I still to this day will look at a movie and go, that's going to go big or that's going to flop, because I read the culture of what's going on in world events, economy, culture, you know what I mean? Like all of those things contribute to whether or not a film will be successful. And if you can time it right, like I was telling this to our friend Buddy the other day, not the other day, it was a couple of months ago. At the moment back then, I don't feel this way now, but at the moment, a couple like last year or even the year before, if a good solid Christmas feel-good comedy came out, it would have been a hit, because everybody needed something optimistic and hopeful. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like it was about reading the terrain. Nothing did, and they missed that opportunity. Now, with the vaccine and everything like that, and, you know, numbers kind of stabilizing, even though they're fluxing a little bit with the whole COVID thing, I think everybody's just kind of over it. We're like, we've accepted the situation, and we're at a new place now, and it's not where I don't think as many people are scared that, you know what I mean, that or pessimistic about the outlook anymore. Yeah. And so I don't think that movie would have the same kind of traction now that it would have then. Now, if I had to put money on it, given the way that the terrain is reading for me, I don't know what I mean. Right now it's kind of tough.
It's chaotic. It's extremely chaotic right now to be able to read an audience, and that's actually something we never really talked about that much in the sequential art department.
Yeah, we regressed to our topic from last week, but you're absolutely right. The film department never talked about that either. About your target market, as they would say.
Well, and that's what's interesting is, I mean, this goes back to sort of, I think my ultimate issue with art school is so much of what it's trying to teach you is kind of this how it teaches you how to be a soldier, and it doesn't teach you how to be like a general, basically. Yeah. It doesn't teach you how to like do your own thing. And that's not even being a general, but whatever. It doesn't teach you how to be a mercenary, basically, which you actually...
That's a better analogy.
If you think about what you're doing, that's actually what you end up doing. Mm-hmm. And I think because the expectation for that college was that there was this pipeline, right, that you just go into these particular jobs that are already selected of businesses that would be doing business with SCAD that they never wanted to teach like anything outside of that sort of infantryman like attitude, you know. And sequential art happened to be one of those weird areas where there really weren't that many jobs being offered anyway. So you were on some level encouraged to do your own thing because that was actually the only way you were gonna make it work. Like,
that's fair.
And it's an interesting sort of dilemma, I think, that I slowly became aware of while at school, because something that was taught to me a lot was like how difficult, it is as a job. I mean, like, not all of the professors I learned from were like people who had been working professionals, but a lot of them were. A lot of them had a lot to say about how difficult it was being a freelance artist, because it is kind of a feast or famine mentality. And I did feel prepared for it in the sense that I was mentally aware of what I should be expecting after college. I was not mentally prepared for how fucking tough it would be after that, Like, I knew it was going to be tough, but I didn't know how tough it was going to be, basically. And
that's fair.
It's pretty tough.
I was going to say, you hit the nail on the head. A lot of the business and finance stuff kind of got left by the wayside, and they taught the artsy stuff. They even taught some of the technical stuff, but to me, it was actually more technical than it was artsy.
Yeah.
The psychology of choosing shots and stuff, they didn't go that deep into it. It was, like, oh, low angle creates dominance, high angle, blah, blah, blah. Dutch angle creates uncertainty. Like, they did a little bit of that. I wish there would have been more of that, because those are tools that I would like to know how to manipulate to, get something different out of my audience when I want it to. But the finance part of it was completely like left. Like, you told me last episode about the professor who taught you guys how to do taxes and stuff. Right. And we got none of that. We got how to put a budget together. Don't get me wrong. And it's basically just scouring the internet and searching for prices and creating a spreadsheet. Like, that's not learning math type shit about how to do this. Like, how much you should spend, or how much you want to spend, or where to find money to fund your film, and all that kind of shit just goes like right out the window. And I wish that they could have taught me more of that. But that's not this episode.
that was one of the big things that I learned was like, okay, in order to get better at comics, I just have to do more comics. Like, that was like, there was no like class I was going to go in, and by virtue of sitting in that class, I was going to become better. Because everything that I learned was through doing more and more projects and having people look at those projects and give feedback about the results of those projects. And why, I think last episode I spoke about, another issue was that the quarter system forced you into a place where you really had to shove a lot of material into a very short span of time, where had it been a semester system, I would have had, for me, I know I would have had more time to do some more projects, get more feedback, and go through that process enough times to like really integrate and solidify the lessons that my professors wanted me to learn. Because looking back now, what I felt like I did was that I did a bunch of projects in like, yes, there were goals in all the projects, but I felt like none of those goals solidified until I was making mini comics, and during, while also going to school at the same time. And then I really didn't solidify any of that stuff that I learned until I like drew a book, By that time, I had really solidified some stuff and was suddenly at a place where I could go, all right, I can do this again. And then I did it a million more times. I'm still doing it now. So, and now I'm at the point where it's like, what do I do next to make it interesting? Because I've sort of solidified all those things that I learned in art school. And now I'm getting to the point where it's like, okay, there's still new peaks to climb and new like I don't want to plateau and just say, oh, well, I've learned everything, I'm done. Like that's not useful to me as a storyteller, as an artist.
Well, that's it, folks. I think I don't know. There's not really much that I'm sure if I was talking, no offense, to another film professor or a student, I might be able to trickle loose a couple more things. But
yeah,
off the top of my head, like, it's just most of the stuff that it's kind of like how you said, just by doing, I've picked up along the way. And I think this is the real thing that I've learned that's most important, that I don't think you could have been taught at art school. There is no one way to do anything. Like we talked about the rule of 180, you can throw that shit out the window, but you have to know it in order to do it. It really comes down to that age-old saying that, the rules were made to be broken.
Yep.
And that's really one of those situations that you don't know. And this is why I get pissed off. There are a lot of people who like to tout that they're filmmakers and they never went to film school. Motherfucker, being a PA is film school. Like, you know what I mean? Like, you're lucky that you're getting paid to do it, and you haven't gotten fired and because you fucked up too much. But you're getting coffee and stuff because you're learning on the job to do it. We paid people to teach us how to do that shit, but eventually, at the end of the day, you realize, okay, this is how it works. How can I make this better? How can I do this smarter? How can I do this, more efficiently? Like, you start picking up on these things. And I think going to art school gave me a window as to how things are done. Yeah. And then gave me a safe space. I hate that I just said that, but a safe space to try out and experiment my own ways of doing things to see if I could better the existing process, the existing process, or if the existing process is really what I should do. And I would say it's a little column A, little column B, little column C, where you really get to kind of find your own approach, your own process. Yeah. And that really was my big takeaway. And like, I learned one of the best things that I could do, and this was something I learned at art school that was not taught to me at art school, was I can write 2 feature screenplays at the same time. Not more than 2, but 2 of them at the same time. Because I realized when I was writing one of them, when I hit writer's block, if I would immediately have motivation and ideas for the other thing. So I was writing Indom at one point, and I was writing Digits at the other time. Yeah. So I was jumping back and forth between an action drama and a comedy coming of age movie. So if I hit a roadblock on one of them and I was bored of it, you know what I mean? Like, you just burn out of gas. Yeah. The creative juices for the other one, I just jumped over to the other script.
No, I know exactly what you're talking about. That happens to me all the time. That is an interesting thing that I learned in art school too. And something that has followed me ever since, which is like kind of this realization of like, oh, I can do way more than I thought I could.
Yeah.
Because I mean, I think probably the moments you probably remember me at my most like intense working sort of mentality was like late junior year, or early senior year, where I was like, I made 2 mini comics while also doing a full workload. So like I was doing as I recall, it was at least 11-hour days, but it was probably more 13 to 14-hour days where like all I did is I would work, go to sleep, go to class, work. Like I didn't really do much else,
I remember me and Joker like would joke about like, oh, let's go out and we'll go get Sakura and da 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 da. I mean, oh, let's get Rainwater. And one of us would either be like, no, he's working. And the other one would be like, well, let's try and drag him away from his table for a minute or 2.
Yeah. No, it was always good when I could get dragged away because I needed to. Like, because I hadn't learned yet what burnout was yet. And I never really had that in college. That wasn't that until much later. But at that time, I was pretty much in the thick of it in the sense of like, I found that obsessive place you want to be at as an artist, right? Where you just really crank out stuff. And, looking back now, I'm not even sure where all that energy came from because I don't have it in the same way as I did then.
Well, we're older.
Yeah.
We're older, and you know what? And this is me making excuses, but we have more responsibilities now.
Sure.
When you're in college, you have to do your own laundry, you have to do your own meals. That's about it. Like, unless you have a part-time job, like, in order to have money to do stuff, that's the extent of your responsibilities. Not a lot of people have pets. You don't have to worry about, if you're out of state like we were, you don't have to go over to your parents' house and help them fix the computer or, the DVR or shit like that. If you really wanted to make it more complicated, you would be in a relationship, which a lot of us, tried to, because everybody at that age is like, oh, I got to be in a relationship. Fuck, you don't. Like,
right.
Don't.
Saying as a single man in his late 30s, like, I would say you could still make the argument for it even at this age.
The point is, though, that, like, a lot of times when you do your work, and now granted, I'm talking to someone who does mostly their work by themselves, but I'm coming from the film background where my mindset is, if I hadn't known my wife and gotten married and all that stuff, that chances are I wouldn't be out on like a dating app trying to find someone who wasn't in film. I would just be working with someone in film, and there would be a connection, and it would go from there. And that's good and bad for health reasons, because I feel like you would never stop talking shop. And that, I don't know if that's a level of crazy in my opinion.
But I would say, like, I've seen firsthand, like, I have a parent who's in a relationship like that, where them and the other person, like, basically kind of work together in the same field.
That's either great or awful.
It's like a little bit of both. Like, because I've seen a lot where it actually really pairs well, especially because it pairs well for their personalities. But I think it also works pretty well from a general business standpoint. So, like, I mean, obviously there are moments where it doesn't work, when it's like two egos clashing, right? That's when it becomes a problem, right? In every other aspect, when egos aren't clashing, like, it's very symbiotic, and everything, like, one thing flows off of another, and suddenly the community that they work in have like this, and they're kind of like power couple sort of a thing,
Yeah.
It always sounds nice when people talk about power couples in the arts. I myself have never experienced it, but like it can work, but it can also have, it can have its drawbacks.
Negatives. Sure. I would think that the number one benefit in terms of me would be, if I did meet someone there, because this is something my wife does not understand, is the time commitment.
Yeah.
Especially for art. Like, when I tell her, I'm going downstairs 5 nights a week because I'm working on the script, it's like, well, why don't you just get it all done tonight? It's like, it doesn't work like that. Like, I only can do so much creatively, and then I'm reworking stuff, and she doesn't understand that stuff. It's hard to compute for, as I quote, a normie.
The concept of creative energy is one that I don't know how to get through to people. It's not like it's not like filling out a spreadsheet or like doing math homework. You don't just crunch it. Like, when people talk about having hit writer's block or stuff like that, it's just being at that point where you have to take a break because you don't have anything else to process.
Yeah.
In that moment.
And it becomes hard because usually what you end up doing to relax is a form of is a product of what it is you're already doing. So I'm working on scripts, and my wife will be like, why don't you just stay up here and watch a movie with me tonight? No, that's fucking work for me, because as soon as the movie starts, I'm thinking about, well, why is that character doing that? Oh, that's a good shot. Oh, I like how he did the lighting here. Yeah. Oh, that's a nice facial tick that the actor threw. Like, that shit doesn't go away.
Yeah, you need to like go mow the lawn or something. Just something so totally not connected at all with any of it.
Which is why people don't understand that A, I like to mow the lawn.
Yeah.
B, I like to do workout. I like to go on the treadmill or lift weights. And C, why I like to cook. because those three things have nothing to fucking do
I
with
cooked gumbo last night for that particular reason. I didn't even need gumbo. I was like, I don't want to work anymore. I'm gonna burn out. I guess I'm just gonna make gumbo because I have this half a chicken that I don't want to just eat the chicken. I want to do something interesting with it. So that's what happened.
Yeah.
And what you'll find too, I think, is like oftentimes the cases for things like that, you just end like, for me, cooking I do, and I'm just not even I'm just doing it. I'm not even thinking about it in the same way I would if I'm making like a comic story or whatever, where I'm putting intense sort of focused energy into it. It's focused, but it's focused in a different way. It's like, it doesn't use brain power in the same way. That I have a hard time describing.
I used to do it like that because I would be very thoughtful about like how my plating was gonna look and the colors that I was gonna use, and now I don't do that anymore because I realize it's using up some of the juices. I mean, sometimes I do, don't get me wrong, because if I know that I'm not doing anything that night, it's like, well, fuck it, I got all this creative energy, I'll use it here. But you know, I try not to, like, especially right now, I'm trying to stick to a organized routine of dinners. I'm not coming up with crazy shit anymore. Mondays burger night, Tuesdays tacos, Wednesdays pizza, Thursdays fucking spaghetti and meatballs, Fridays fried chicken. Saturday, I don't really know. Sunday, I don't really know. Those are kind of up in the air days. But for the most part, those 5 days where I'm working, right? Yeah. When I'm doing the day, I try not to use creative energy thinking about what meal I'm preparing, because that's just a fucking waste. It really is. And I've gotten to the point where it's not that I'm wearing the same clothes every day, but I used to pick out which shirt I would wear in the morning. Like, I would be like, oh, I know I was going to see so-and-so today. They like this movie. I'll wear this shirt today. Now, Monday through Friday, I just grab whichever shirt's at the top of my stack, and that's the shirt I'm wearing today. Done. Like, there's no more question about it. That's the shirt. And I don't give any thought to it. Like, you really have to start controlling. And it goes back to, like I said, what we said about being responsible and controlling yourself in certain ways that you learn when you go to college, especially an out-of-state college, is that self-reliability, self-control, self-discipline to do things. And I think that's the number one thing that you really do get from going to art college, is that discipline. If you want it and you're aware of it, because like I said, there are motherfuckers we went to college with who slept through their alarm, skipped classes, didn't give a shit, you know, showed up to set late, you know, didn't turn in the homework, didn't bother to even do the project. That only happened to me once, and that was that fucking 3D class. But, you know, it really comes down to that whole self-reliance thing. So I would say that overall, I don't know if it was worth the price tag, but I think it was beneficial to my growth as an artist to go to art school.
That's the issue about art school, is like, it's the price tag is the main thing. Like, if it hadn't been so expensive, it would be easy for me to say, oh yeah, go to that instead of go to college, because it's way more fun.
Well, but you also have to factor in the internet is so much different now, though, because when we were going to college, it wasn't so much what it is now, where people have noticed the orange and blue color schemes used on movie posters and shit. Back then, I learned that shit in art school. You know what I mean? Complementary colors. Yeah. So that kind of thing has become culturally absorbed. It's like in the zeitgeist now that people understand complementary colors will really make things pop, and it's, you know, appeasing to the eye, and marketing and advertising, and that's what the kinds of things that you do. So, you know, it was a different world for us. So I don't really know if I would recommend going to art school for someone now. Like, there are pros that I think that have not changed yet. I don't know if they will or not, but I think there are pros that have not changed about going to art school. I don't know if they're worth the cost, though.
Yeah,
that's really where I struggle.
At this point, the main thing I would say is probably socialization. You know, being able to meet people who would also be working in your field at an early level. That's the only thing that I can think of that you would really get out of art school right now, versus just learning off of YouTube, basically.
Yeah.
You can still socialize and build networks online. It's just not as easy and not the same sort of level of intensity, like it's not the same. I don't know if it would be the same as like where you're able to make friends that last like lifetime kind of a thing.
Yeah.
I don't know. I've never like you. I've never been in that position.
I don't know if this applies to sequential department, but I know for film department you have access to equipment that you normally would not have access to.
No, we didn't. Well, we kind of have that. Not in the same way you did.
Yeah, like classic 70 millimeter film cameras and, all that kind of shit. Like I remember they had Cine Altas and they were like, this is the fucking camera they shot the new Star Wars movies on, the digital one. Ooh. And we were all crazed about it. But at the same time, you could probably save up that money working at Target or something, you know what I mean? Living at home, and you could buy a camera that's good enough, probably better now, that could get you the results and stuff like that by not wasting it. But there's a learning curve in figuring out the camera. The instruction manual to a camera does not tell you what art school will tell you about it.
There's a part of me that thinks about, if I had that same amount of money to just rent a cheap ass apartment and just get whatever equipment I wanted to make whatever I want. Yeah. I could have had way more time to teach myself. Yeah. And the stuff I could have done would have been a lot like more wild and more trying shit out.
I'm going to counter that in one way. And this is the only thing, because I used to tell myself this all the time, that I paid an astronomical amount for a college that I probably could have got by just renting books at the library or looking shit up online. There is a level of doubt that will come with that you've missed something. The pro of going to a college is the syllabus, is the courses, is the course requirements that they have for you, where you can have confidence. Like we said, they didn't teach everything because of the fucking budgets and stuff, but they are covering so much of the things that maybe you might not have thought about teaching yourself, or even knew to look up. Like, you know what I mean? Like the phrases of, a style or the rules of certain things or whatever. You didn't know the phrase complementary colors or the rule of 180 or things like that. So you would never know to look that up to learn about it. So there is that benefit that you do have a little bit more of a relaxation, that you have been taught fundamentals at the very least that you can grow from. Whereas if you go self-taught, you are at the mercy of whatever comes in front of you. It's not necessarily everything you should know or need to know. You can learn, you can get the fucking best at something that you stumble upon and you're like, oh, I want to learn more about that. But if it doesn't ever get in front of you or nobody ever mentions it, you're really behind at some point. You know what I mean? Like, and then that doubt will fuck with you a lot. So, I mean, there is a peace of mind that comes with going to a proper education, if you will, that they are going to give you the tools that you need that you don't even know exist. So that would be the number one, or number two, I would say. Number two reason why I would recommend going to an art college. But again, weigh the cost benefit of that. You really look at, because I could have probably gone to a different art school for filmmaking that was a lot cheaper. I'm not saying going like community college, although your route where you said you did the fundamental like core classes and shit at a local college and then transferring over, that's a brilliant move too. So I think if somebody was smart enough to finagle it, you know what I mean, where they found a college in the major that they want, they know that they're going to get what they need there, and it's at a good price that they think that they can manage, and then they go to a local college that they know the courses that they knock out even cheaper will transfer over and manipulate it so that you're paying the least amount of money. You know what I mean? It's like going to the grocery store. Like, I'm going to go to ShopRite or Stop and Shop. What am I going for? Soda. All right, which one's got it on sale? Go to that one. It's the same fucking soda. Like, mostly you're going to get the same thing. I'm not saying that, like Full Sail and USC are the same schools when it comes to filmmaking, but you're going to get the same fucking overall picture of what you need to do.
Yeah, I would definitely say for those of y'all out there who feel very confident about your ability to be a self-learner, and you're in a position where, like, I don't know, your parents are pressuring you into getting a degree or whatever, go to a community college or go to a state college, something cheap.
Yeah.
Major in business, because that is such everybody likes that.
Yep.
And it'll teach you the skills that you need to be your own entrepreneur or like self-starter or whatever.
That's pretty genius.
Stuff that I wish I would have done, quite frankly. And while you're doing that, just make the film that you want to make, or the comic, or whatever it is,
the work,
the art that you want to do. And you're going to save yourself a ton of money. You're going to give yourself probably more financial opportunities, quite frankly, that you can use to fund your work. So that would be my recommendation.
Funding your work is the struggle that will never go away.
Yeah.
That's the main takeaway. When you become an artist, and you see it today, like even big movie stars and directors and stuff like that still struggle with getting funding. So be prepared to accept that. Even Steven Spielberg has to fight to get something greenlit. So you really got to understand that going in. So the more money you can save for yourself, and you have to prove yourself eventually if you want other people to take a chance on you. So in order to prove yourself, you got to gamble on yourself, and that costs money if you want to do it right.
Yeah.
So saving money is probably the most important thing. All right, we're coming up on an hour, so I guess we've fulfilled our requirement to our listeners. I didn't think we were going to make it 20 minutes into this podcast, but I guess we've proven ourselves wrong. Unless you've got anything else to add, Mr. Rainwater.
No, that's it.
We're done. Go home. Go start your work. We'll see you next week. Bye.
Bye.